hit subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now get comfortable and relax. My name is Caleb Ford. What happened in Kisatchie Forest last September changed 5 lives permanently. 4 of us made it out. 1 didn't. And I'm still not sure if what came back with us was entirely human. I worked at Meridian Solutions, a mid-sized tech consulting firm in Baton Rouge. The camping trip was Marcus's idea. He'd just been promoted to senior project manager and wanted to build team cohesion before the Q4 push. I thought it was a terrible idea from the start, but I didn't say anything. You don't push back on the new boss's first initiative, especially not when you're hoping for a promotion yourself. There were 5 of us. Marcus Chen, who organized everything, Jennifer Walsh, our lead developer and the most competent person on the team, David Price, a junior analyst who'd only been with the company 6 months, Amy Rodriguez, fresh out of college and working her first real job, and me. We left Thursday morning in 2 RVs Marcus had rented. He and I took the larger one, a 30-foot Class A that handled like a bus. Jen drove the smaller Class C with David and Amy. The plan was simple. 3 nights in Kisatchie National Forest at the Kisatchie Bayou Campground, a semi-primitive site Marcus had found online. Hiking during the day, campfires at night, back to civilization Sunday afternoon. The drive took about 2 hours. Marcus talked the entire time about synergy and team dynamics. I nodded at appropriate intervals and watched the landscape change from suburban sprawl to pine forest. Louisiana in September is still brutally hot, and even with the AC running full blast, I could feel sweat collecting under my shirt collar. We arrived at the campground around noon. The ranger station was a small wooden structure that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 70s. A bored teenager in a uniform 2 sizes too large checked us in, handed Marcus a map with our site marked in pencil, and told us to watch for wild hogs. "They're more scared of you than you are of them," she said, in a tone that suggested she'd said it 1,000 times. "But don't leave food out." Our site was a half-mile down a dirt road that wound through thick pine and oak. The canopy overhead was so dense that even in midday, the light had a greenish, filtered quality. We passed 2 other occupied sites, one with a family and a pop-up camper, another with an older couple in a vintage Airstream, before reaching ours at the end of the road. The site itself was just a cleared area with a fire ring, a picnic table, and a weathered post with our site number, 23. The trees pressed in close on 3 sides. To the north, I could hear water moving, probably one of the bayou tributaries the ranger had mentioned. We spent the afternoon setting up. Marcus was particular about the RV positioning, making me back up and pull forward 3 times until he was satisfied with the angle. Jen parked the smaller RV parallel to ours, leaving a space between them where we set up camp chairs around the fire ring. David and Amy explored while we worked. I heard them laughing somewhere in the trees, and when they came back, David was carrying a walking stick he'd found. "There's a trail that way," Amy said, pointing west. "Want to check it out before dinner?" We decided against it. The sun would set in a few hours, and none of us were experienced hikers. Marcus suggested we save the trails for Friday when we'd have a full day. That evening, we made burgers on Marcus's portable grill and drank beer around the fire. The conversation was exactly what you'd expect from coworkers trying to relax while still being coworkers. Safe topics, work gossip carefully disguised as concern, the occasional joke that landed awkwardly. David seemed particularly nervous, jumping every time a branch cracked in the darkness beyond our fire. "You okay?" Jen asked him. "Fine," he said. "Just not used to being this far from civilization." "We're barely an hour from town," Marcus said. "It feels farther." He was right. In the darkness, with only our fire and the RV lights, the forest felt vast and empty. The family we'd seen earlier had packed up and left before dinner. The older couple's lights were visible through the trees, but they might as well have been miles away. We stayed up until around 11. Amy was the first to turn in, followed by David. Jen, Marcus, and I sat by the dying fire for another hour, not really talking, just looking at the flames. "This is good," Marcus said finally. "We needed this." I didn't disagree, even though I wanted to be home. I woke up at 3:47 a.m. I know the exact time because I checked my phone when I felt the pain. My left forearm was burning. Not the sharp pain of a fresh injury, but the deep ache of something healing. I sat up in the small bedroom at the back of the RV, disoriented in the complete darkness. Marcus was snoring in the fold-out bed in the main cabin. I turned on the light above my bunk and looked at my arm. 3 parallel cuts ran from my wrist to my elbow. They were about 4 inches long, perfectly straight, and evenly spaced, maybe an inch apart. The cuts weren't deep, but they'd bled. My arm was sticky with it, and there were spots on the sheet. I had no memory of cutting myself. No memory of anything after getting into bed. My first thought was that I'd done it in my sleep somehow, maybe scratched myself against something in the RV. But the cuts were too precise, too deliberate, and I'd felt nothing until waking up. I got up and went to the small bathroom. The cuts had mostly stopped bleeding, but they looked fresh, angry, and red. I washed them with water from the sink, trying to remember. Had I gotten up during the night? Walked into something? Nothing. I put on a shirt and went outside. The campground was absolutely silent. No wind, no animal sounds, nothing. Even the bayou had gone quiet. The fire was out, just a pile of gray ash. In the dim moonlight filtering through the trees, I could see the other RV. Its lights were off. I was about to go back inside when I heard a sound from the trees to the west, a soft rustling like something moving through brush. I stood still, listening. After a moment, it stopped. Probably a hog, I thought. The ranger had warned us. I went back to bed but couldn't sleep. I kept looking at the cuts on my arm, running my fingers along the edges. They hurt, but not unbearably. What bothered me more was not knowing how they'd gotten there. At dawn, I heard Marcus getting up. I pretended to be asleep until he went outside, then got dressed and joined him. He was standing by the fire ring, looking at his arm. "What the hell?" he said when he saw me. He rolled up his sleeve. 3 cuts, identical to mine. Same length, same spacing, same placement from wrist to elbow. We stared at each other. "Did you?" I started. "No." "You?" "No." Jen emerged from the other RV a few minutes later. She saw our faces and said, "What's wrong?" We showed her our arms. She was quiet for a moment, then rolled up her own sleeve. 3 cuts, identical to ours. David came out next, then Amy. All of us had the same cuts. All on the left forearm. All perfectly spaced and straight. "This isn't possible," David said. His voice was shaking. "This doesn't make sense." "There has to be an explanation," Jen said, but she didn't sound convinced. We stood in a circle, looking at each other's arms, trying to rationalize what we were seeing. 5 people, 5 identical injuries, no memory of how we got them. Marcus suggested we leave, pack up and head back to Baton Rouge. But something, pride maybe, or the fear of looking foolish when there had to be a logical explanation, made us hesitate. "Maybe it's some kind of plant," Amy said. "Like poison ivy, but it cuts instead of making you itch." "That's not a thing," Jen said. "Or a bug. Fire ants don't make surgical incisions." We went back and forth like this for half an hour. The cuts weren't serious enough to require medical attention. They'd heal. And more importantly, none of us wanted to be the person who panicked over what was probably nothing. Eventually, we agreed to stay. If anything else strange happened, we'd leave immediately. But for now, we'd continue with the plan. After breakfast, we decided to hike the trail Amy and David had found the day before. Movement seemed better than sitting around the campsite obsessing over our arms. The trail was narrow and overgrown, marked by occasional faded blazes on trees. It wound through the pine forest, roughly following the bayou's edge. The water was dark and still, covered in places by a thick green film. We walked single file, Marcus in the lead, then Jen, then Amy, then David, with me bringing up the rear. Nobody talked much. The cuts had unsettled all of us more than we were willing to admit. About a mile in, the trail split. One branch continued along the bayou, the other headed north into denser forest. There was a wooden sign at the junction, but the paint had faded to nothing. Marcus pulled out his phone to check the map. He frowned. No signal. We're in the middle of nowhere, Jen said. Of course there's no signal. I had 3 bars at the campsite this morning. She checked her phone. Nothing. We all checked. 5 phones, 0 signal. Which way? Amy asked. Marcus studied the trail. The map shows a loop. If we go left, it should bring us back to camp from the other side, maybe 3 miles total. We went left. The trees got thicker. The canopy overhead was so dense now that very little light reached the forest floor. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. I started noticing things I hadn't before. The complete absence of birdsong. The way the trees all seemed to lean slightly inward. The strange regularity of the spaces between them. After about 20 minutes, David stopped. Are we going in circles? He asked. What do you mean? That tree. He pointed to a massive oak with a distinctive scar on its trunk. I swear we passed it already. We've been going straight, Marcus said. I know, but you're just nervous, Amy said. They all start looking the same after a while. We kept walking. 10 minutes later, we passed the same tree again. This time, everyone saw it. The scar was unmistakable, a long curved line that looked like a lightning strike had split the bark. Okay, Jen said. We're definitely going in a circle. Marcus checked his phone again, even though he knew there was no signal. The compass app says we're heading northeast, that's the right direction. Then why did we pass the same tree twice? None of us had an answer. We stood there, 5 adults in business casual hiking clothes, trying to understand how we'd managed to get lost on a clearly marked trail. Let's backtrack, I suggested. Go back to the fork and take the other path. Everyone agreed. We turned around and retraced our steps. But after 15 minutes of walking, we hadn't reached the fork. Instead, we found ourselves at the oak tree again. David started breathing hard. This isn't happening. This can't be happening. Calm down, Marcus said. We've walked in a straight line. How are we at the same place? We must have veered off the trail without realizing it. There's no trail anymore, David was shouting now. Look around. Do you see any blazes? Any path? He was right. The trail had disappeared. We were standing in the middle of the forest with no clear indication of which direction we'd come from. Jen pulled out her phone and tried to open the map app, even though we had no signal. The screen flickered, showing our blue dot positioned somewhere that didn't match any trail on the map. Then the app crashed. My battery just died, Amy said. Mine too, David added. I checked mine. It had been at 60% when we left camp. Now it showed 5% and was dropping rapidly as I watched. Everyone turn off your phones, Marcus said. Save what battery we have left. We did. The sudden silence was oppressive. Okay, Jen said. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the tension underneath. We can't get more lost than we already are. Let's pick a direction and commit to it. Eventually, we'll hit the bayou or the road. Which direction? Amy asked. Marcus looked around. The trees were identical in every direction. No sun visible through the canopy to orient by. No slope to follow. That way, he said, pointing randomly. And we walk in as straight a line as possible, no matter what. We walked for what felt like hours. The forest never changed. Pine trees, oak trees, the same undergrowth, the same filtered green light. My legs ached. My throat was dry, and the cuts on my arm had started burning again. Then, without warning, we stumbled into a clearing. The campground. Our campground. But we'd approached it from the north, which made no sense given the direction we'd been walking. And more disturbingly, the sun was setting. We'd left at noon. It should have been mid-afternoon at most. What time is it? David asked. Jen turned her phone back on. The battery showed 3%, but it was enough to check the time. 7:15, she said. That's impossible, Marcus said. We've been hiking maybe 2 hours. My phone says otherwise. We checked the other phones that still had battery. All showed the same time. 7:15. Somehow, 7 hours had passed. We walked into the campsite in silence. Everything looked exactly as we'd left it. Chairs around the cold fire ring. The RVs parked parallel. Nothing disturbed. But something felt wrong. I couldn't articulate what exactly. Just a sense that things were slightly off. The angle of the shadows, maybe. Or the way the silence pressed against my ears. "I need to sit down," David said. He looked pale. We all did. The exhaustion hit suddenly, like someone had thrown a switch. One moment I was fine, the next I could barely stand. Amy stumbled toward the smaller RV. Marcus caught her arm. "Careful," he said. "I'm okay, just tired." We decided to skip dinner and go straight to bed. Nobody protested. The thought of staying awake felt impossible. I don't remember getting into the RV. I don't remember taking off my shoes or lying down. One moment I was standing outside in the twilight. The next I was in my bunk with sunlight streaming through the window. My phone said it was 10:30 a.m. Saturday. I'd slept for 15 hours. The cuts on my arm had changed. They were still there, but now they looked weeks old instead of days. The edges had closed completely, leaving raised pink lines. And there were more of them. 3 new cuts, parallel to the original 3, running from elbow to shoulder. I sat up too fast and felt dizzy. In the main cabin, Marcus's bed was empty. I could hear voices outside. I got dressed and stepped out into a day that was already hot and humid. The others were sitting around the fire ring. All of them looked exhausted despite the long sleep, and all of them were staring at their arms. 6 cuts each now. 3 on the forearm, 3 on the upper arm, all identical, all on the left side. "This is fucked," Marcus said. It was the first time I'd heard him swear. "This is completely fucked." "We need to leave," David said, "right now." For once, nobody argued. We spent 20 minutes packing, threw everything into the RVs without bothering to organize. Didn't worry about leaving the site clean, just wanted to get out. Marcus climbed into the driver's seat of the big RV. I got in the passenger side. Through the window I watched Jen, David, and Amy pile into the smaller RV. Marcus turned the key. Nothing. He tried again. The engine turned over but wouldn't catch. He pumped the gas, adjusted the choke, tried a third time. Nothing. "You've got to be kidding me," he said. I saw Jen through her windshield, turning her own key. Her expression told me everything I needed to know. Both RVs were dead. We got out and popped the hoods. I don't know much about engines, but even I could tell something was wrong. Everything looked disconnected. Not obviously so, but like someone had carefully loosened just enough wires and hoses to disable the vehicles without making it apparent. "Did someone do this?" Amy asked. "Who?" Jen said. "We're the only ones here. The older couple left yesterday. I saw them pull out while we were packing for the hike." We stood there, looking at the disabled engines, trying to process what this meant. "We'll walk out," Marcus said. "It's only a half-mile to the main road. We can get help there." We started walking. The dirt road that had brought us in should have been easy to follow, but within 5 minutes, we were lost again. The road simply ended, vanished into forest as if it had never existed. "This is the right direction," Marcus insisted. I marked it on my phone. "Your phone has no signal and no battery," Jen said. "The compass still works." "The compass is wrong. It has to be." We turned back, found the campsite again, tried a different direction. Same result. The road was gone. By mid-afternoon, we were back at the campsite, exhausted and starting to panic. David had suggested we follow the bayou until we hit civilization, but the bayou seemed to shift position. One moment it was north of the campsite, the next it was east. The water never looked the same twice. "We're going to die here," David said. He was sitting in one of the camp chairs, hugging himself. "We're going to die and no one will ever find us." "Stop it," Jen said. "We're not going to die." "Then explain what's happening. Explain the cuts and the lost time and the fucking roads that disappear." She couldn't. None of us could. That night, We built a large fire and agreed to take shifts keeping watch. No one said what we were watching for. We just knew that being unconscious again felt dangerous. Marcus took the first shift. At midnight, he woke Jen for the second. At 3 a.m., Jen was supposed to wake me. I woke at dawn. The fire had burned down to coals. Everyone was asleep, and Jen was gone. Jen! Amy was awake immediately, looking around. Where's Jen? We searched the campsite, called her name into the forest, found nothing. Her phone was in the RV, sitting on her bunk. Her shoes were missing, but everything else, wallet, keys, jacket, was still there. She wouldn't just wander off, Marcus said. Maybe she went to find help, Amy suggested. In the middle of the night, without telling anyone? We searched wider, staying within sight of each other. The forest seemed larger in daylight, stretching endlessly in every direction. No matter how far we walked, we always ended up back at the campsite. Around noon, David spotted her. She was standing about 50 yards into the trees facing away from us, just standing there perfectly still. Jen, Marcus called. She didn't respond. We approached slowly. Something about her posture felt wrong. The way she held her arms slightly away from her body. The way her head tilted at an odd angle. Jen? Marcus said again, quieter this time. She turned around. I'll remember her face for the rest of my life. It was Jen, same features, same hair, but the expression was completely wrong. Her mouth was pulled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. And her eyes. They weren't quite focused, like she was looking at something just beyond us. Hi, she said. The voice was hers, but the inflection was off. Too cheerful. I went for a walk. You've been gone for hours, Marcus said. We were worried. Was I? She looked confused, but the smile never wavered. That's strange. It only felt like minutes. She walked past us toward the campsite. We followed, exchanging glances. At the fire ring, she sat down in one of the chairs and stared at the dead coals. Are you okay? Amy asked. I'm perfect, Jen said. She turned that wrong smile on Amy. Everything is perfect. Where did you go? Into the forest. Why? I was called. Called by who? Jen's smile widened. I don't remember. She wouldn't elaborate, wouldn't explain where she'd been or what she meant by being called. She just sat in that chair, smiling at nothing, occasionally saying things that made no sense. The pattern needs to complete, she said at one point. What pattern? Marcus asked. The one we're making. Jen, you're scaring us. There's nothing to be scared of. It doesn't hurt. David suggested we try to carry her out of the forest, force her to leave with us, but when we tried to take her arms to help her stand, she fought with strength that seemed impossible. She was 5'4" and maybe 120 pounds, but she threw David backwards into a tree hard enough that he cried out in pain. After that, we kept our distance. Night fell. We built another fire, more for psychological comfort than warmth. Jen sat in her chair, facing the flames, that smile never faltering. We should tie her up, David whispered, before she hurts someone. Tie her up with what? Marcus said. Rope. There must be rope in one of the RVs. And then what? Even if we could restrain her, we can't get out of here. We're stuck. So we just wait? Hope she snaps out of it? You have a better idea? They argued in whispers while Amy and I watched Jen. She hadn't moved in hours, hadn't blinked that I could see, just stared at the fire with that horrible smile. I checked my arm. 9 cuts now, 3 new ones on the shoulder. The pattern was moving up my arm toward my neck. I showed the others. All of us had 9 cuts, all in the same places. What happens when the pattern reaches our faces? Amy asked. Nobody answered. Around midnight, Jen spoke. It wants in, she said, still staring at the fire. It's been trying for so long, but the way is almost open now. What's trying to get in? Marcus asked. Jen turned to look at him. In the firelight, her eyes looked black. Everything that's been waiting, Then she stood up and walked into the forest. We tried to follow, but she moved impossibly fast. One moment she was visible between the trees, the next she'd vanished completely. We called her name until our voices were hoarse, then gave up and returned to the fire. "She's gone," David said. He was crying. "She's gone, and we're next." "Stop it," Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. We stayed awake the rest of the night, feeding wood to the fire, watching the tree line. Every shadow looked like Jen standing there, watching us. Every sound might have been her footsteps. Dawn came, gray and cold. I'd never been more relieved to see daylight. And then Jen walked out of the forest. She looked worse. Her clothes were torn, covered in dirt and something dark that might have been blood. Her hair hung in tangles, but she was still smiling. "Did you miss me?" she asked. "Where have you been?" Marcus stood up. "Jen, please. You need to tell us what's happening." "I told you already. The pattern needs to complete." She held up her left arm. Cuts covered it from wrist to shoulder, dozens of them, crisscrossing and overlapping until her entire arm looked like a piece of carved wood. "Mine is almost done." "My God," Amy whispered. "You should feel honored," Jen said. "Not everyone gets chosen." "Chosen for what?" I asked. "To become a door." She started walking toward Amy. Marcus stepped between them. "Don't come any closer." "It's her turn," Jen said. She called the loudest. "I didn't call anything." Amy backed away. "Not consciously, but your fear speaks volumes. It echoes." Jen tried to step around Marcus. He grabbed her arm. She moved faster than should have been possible. One moment Marcus was holding her. The next she had him by the throat, lifting him off the ground. He struggled, his face turning red, then purple. "Let him go." David grabbed a piece of firewood and swung it at Jen's head. She didn't even flinch. The wood connected with a solid thunk, but she just turned to look at David with those black eyes and that endless smile. "Your turn is coming," she said. Then she released Marcus and walked calmly back into the forest. Marcus collapsed, gasping. We helped him to a chair. His throat was already bruising. "What is she?" Amy asked. "Not Jen," Marcus croaked. "Not anymore." We spent the day preparing. David found a toolbox in one of the RVs and fashioned crude weapons: a hammer, a wrench, a long screwdriver. Marcus located a container of lighter fluid. Amy and I gathered the sharpest branches we could find. It was pointless, and we knew it. If Jen came back, if the thing wearing Jen's body came back, our makeshift arsenal wouldn't matter. But doing something felt better than waiting. The cuts continued to appear. By sunset, we each had 12. The pattern had reached my collarbone. "How many do you think we'll get?" David asked. "Does it matter?" I said. "I just want to know. I want to know how long we have." None of us slept that night. We sat around the fire, weapons in hand, watching the darkness. Jen appeared around 3 a.m. She looked even worse now. The cuts covered her arms, her neck, the visible portions of her chest where her shirt had torn. Her skin between the cuts had taken on a gray, waxy quality, and her smile had widened beyond what should have been anatomically possible. "Time to finish the pattern," she said. She came at us fast. David swung his hammer, but she dodged and grabbed his arm, twisting until something cracked. He screamed. Marcus threw the lighter fluid, trying to buy us time to run, but Jen didn't react to the liquid soaking her clothes. Amy and I ran toward the RVs. Behind us I heard Marcus yelling, then a sudden sharp silence. We made it to the smaller RV and slammed the door. I locked it, knowing it was futile. The thing outside could tear through aluminum like paper. "We're going to die," Amy said. She'd curled up in one of the seats, hugging her knees. "Maybe not," I said, though I didn't believe it. Footsteps outside. Slow, deliberate. Then Jen's voice, closer than it should have been. "The pattern is almost complete. Just 3 more doors to open." A hand punched through the RV's wall like it was cardboard. Fingers closed around my ankle. I kicked, but the grip was iron. Amy grabbed the screwdriver from where David had dropped it and stabbed down at the hand. Once, twice. 3 times. No reaction, no blood. The hand pulled. I grabbed the table, the counter, anything to anchor myself, but I was sliding toward the hole. Amy was screaming, stabbing frantically, and then the hand released me. I heard footsteps moving away, then nothing. We waited. Minutes passed, an hour, 2. Finally, as dawn started to lighten the sky, I unlocked the door and looked outside. Marcus was sitting in one of the camp chairs by the dead fire. He turned when he heard us. "She's gone," he said. His voice sounded hollow. "Walked back into the forest about an hour ago." "David?" Amy asked. Marcus shook his head. "We found David's body about 20 yards into the trees. I won't describe what had been done to him, except to say that the cuts on his arms had been finished. His entire body was covered in them, every inch of skin carved with that precise, even pattern. We left him there. There was nothing else we could do. The 3 of us spent that day in a kind of numb silence. We didn't talk about what we'd seen, didn't speculate about what Jen had become or what was happening to us. We just sat by the fire, occasionally checking our arms. The cuts kept appearing. 15, 18, 21. That night, Marcus started laughing. It started as a chuckle, then built to a full belly laugh that went on and on until he was gasping for breath. "What's so funny?" Amy asked. "Don't you get it?" Marcus wiped tears from his eyes. "We were dead the moment we got those first cuts. This whole time we've just been waiting, playing out the pattern." "Stop it," I said. "No, really. Think about it. 5 people, identical cuts, no way out. We're not escaping. We're completing something, finishing a process that started Friday night. You don't know that. Look at your arms, Caleb. Count the cuts. We're up to 24 now, and they're moving in a specific pattern like someone's carving us into doors. That's what Jen said, right? We're becoming doors." "Doors to what?" Amy asked quietly. Marcus started laughing again. "Does it matter?" I wanted to argue, but I was too tired. The cuts had reached my jaw. I could feel them appearing even without looking, a brief cold sensation, then warmth as blood welled up, then the ache of healing. The pattern was almost complete. Around midnight, Amy spoke. "I'm sorry," she said. "For what?" I asked. "For being scared. Maybe Marcus is right. Maybe my fear called something." "That's not your fault, isn't it?" She held up her arm. In the firelight, I could see the cuts running all the way up to her temple now. I was so afraid the whole time, from the moment we arrived, like I knew something was wrong but couldn't articulate it. And then the cuts started, and I was even more afraid, and... She trailed off. Marcus had gone very still. He was staring at his hands. "Marcus?" I said. He looked up at me. His eyes were black. "The pattern is complete," he said, with that same wrong inflection Jen had used. Then he smiled. Amy screamed. I grabbed her hand, and we ran into the forest. Behind us, I could hear Marcus's laughter, but it didn't sound human anymore. It sounded like wind through dead trees, like water moving through a cave, like 1,000 voices speaking in unison. We ran blindly, crashing through undergrowth, not caring about direction, just away. The forest seemed to move around us. Trees that had been on our left suddenly appeared on our right. The ground tilted at impossible angles, and behind us, always behind us, that terrible laughter. Then we were at the bayou. Dark water stretched before us, covered in that green film. "We have to swim," Amy said. "We don't know how deep it is. We don't have a choice." She was right. The laughter was getting closer. We waded in. The water was warm, almost body temperature, and it smelled like rot. My feet couldn't find the bottom. I started swimming, my clothes dragging at me, the cuts on my arms burning as the water touched them. Behind us, Marcus, the thing that had been Marcus, stood at the water's edge. He was smiling, but he wasn't following. just standing there, watching us struggle. We made it to the other side, pulled ourselves onto the muddy bank, exhausted. When I looked back, Marcus was gone. "Come on," I said. "We have to keep moving." We walked for what felt like hours. The forest gradually changed. The trees became less uniform. Birdsong returned. And finally, impossibly, we saw a road. A real road, with asphalt and a yellow line down the middle. We walked down it, not talking, barely believing it was real. After about a mile, a pickup truck appeared. The driver, an older man with a concerned expression, pulled over. "You folks okay?" he asked. "You look like hell." "Our car broke down," I heard myself say. "In the forest, can you take us to town?" "Sure thing, hop in." The drive to town took 15 minutes. We passed the turnoff to the campground. I recognized the ranger station, but I didn't say anything. The driver dropped us at a gas station. We thanked him, then stood in the parking lot, blinking in the afternoon sun. "What do we tell people?" Amy asked. "I don't know. We can't tell them the truth." "I know." We eventually settled on a story. Car accident on a back road. We'd gotten separated from the others while looking for help. It was thin, but it was all we had. The police were concerned but sympathetic. They sent a search party to the campground. They found nothing. No RVs, no campsite, no bodies. Just empty forest. The rental company confirmed they'd rented 2 RVs to Marcus Chen. GPS data showed the vehicles had been returned to the lot Sunday afternoon, 3 days after we'd supposedly driven them into the forest. There was no evidence we'd ever been to Kisachi, except for the cuts. Amy and I still have them. 48 cuts each, running from our left wrists up to our temples in perfect, parallel lines. They've healed to thin white scars, but they're still there. We don't see each other anymore. Can't. Every time I look at her, I see Marcus's black eyes and Jen's impossible smile. I assume she feels the same. I still work at Meridian Solutions. They hired someone to replace Marcus, Jen, and David. Nobody talks about what happened. The official story is that 3 employees died in a hiking accident. I don't correct them. But I think about it every day. About the pattern we were part of. About doors. Because here's what I haven't told anyone. Last week I woke up at 3:47 a.m. to the feeling of burning on my arm. When I turned on the light, I saw 3 new cuts. Fresh ones. Identical to the first cuts we got in the forest. And when I checked my phone, there was a text from a number I didn't recognize. The pattern begins again. I haven't slept since. I sit by my window and watch the darkness outside. Because I know what's out there now. I know what's waiting. And I know that sooner or later I'm going to walk out my door and into those trees. I'm going to complete the pattern. We all are. My name is Sarah James. I need to write this down while I still can, while my thoughts are still my own. I'm not sure how much longer I have before I can't trust what's in my head anymore. It started 3 weeks ago at an RV site in Ocala National Forest, Florida. My boyfriend Marcus and I had driven down from Atlanta with our friends, Jen and Tyler. We'd rented a Class C motorhome for the week, one of those older models with the bed over the cab and a dinette that converted into sleeping space. The plan was simple: disconnect, decompress, maybe do some hiking. Marcus had been stressed about work, and I'd just finished a brutal semester of grad school. We needed this. The campground was called Silver Glen Springs Recreation Area. We'd picked it because the reviews mentioned the natural springs and the relative seclusion. What they didn't mention was how dense the forest was, how the canopy blocked out most of the sunlight even at noon, or how the humidity made everything feel damp and close. We arrived on a Thursday afternoon. The site attendant was an older man with a sunburned nose who barely looked up from his phone when we checked in. He handed Marcus a map with our site circled in red pen and told us to watch out for the gators near the springs. That was it. No other warnings. Site 47 was at the far end of the campground, backing up against a thick wall of palmettos and live oaks. There were maybe a dozen other RVs scattered throughout the area, but ours was the most isolated. The nearest neighbor was 3 sites over, and I couldn't even see their vehicle through the vegetation. "Perfect," Jen said when we pulled in. She was already pulling out her phone to take pictures. "This is exactly what I needed. No cell service, no distractions." She was right about the cell service. One bar if you stood in exactly the right spot near the bathhouse, otherwise nothing. Marcus seemed relieved. Tyler less so, but he didn't complain. We spent the first day setting up and exploring. The RV was functional but dated with brown paneling and orange upholstery that probably hadn't been updated since the 80s. There was a weird smell too, something musty and organic, but we figured that was just from being closed up. We opened all the windows and ran the fan. That first night was uneventful. We grilled hot dogs, drank beer, played cards at the picnic table. The forest was loud with insects and frogs, and occasionally we'd hear something larger moving through the underbrush. But that was expected. Marcus and I took the bed over the cab. Jen and Tyler got the dinette conversion. I slept fine. The second day, Friday, we hiked to the springs. The water was crystalline, almost surreal in its clarity, and cold enough to make you gasp. We swam for a few hours, then hiked back. The trail was marked but narrow, and at points the vegetation crowded in so close we had to walk single file. It was on the way back that Tyler noticed something odd. "Hey, check this out," he said, stopping near a fallen log. We gathered around. Growing along the underside of the log was a patch of fungus I'd never seen before. It was pale, almost translucent, with a faint bluish tinge. The caps were small, maybe an inch across, and they seemed to pulse slightly, though that might have been a trick of the filtered sunlight. "Don't touch it," Jen said immediately. She was a biology teacher and generally cautious about unknown plants and fungi. "I wasn't going to," Tyler said, but he was crouched down, studying it closely. "It's kind of beautiful, isn't it?" It was and it wasn't. There was something unsettling about it, something that made me want to step back. I couldn't explain why. Marcus took a photo with his phone. "Maybe we can look it up when we get home." We continued back to the RV. I didn't think much about the fungus after that. That night I woke up around 3 a.m. I'm not sure what woke me, but I was suddenly alert, staring at the ceiling of the cab over bed. Marcus was snoring softly beside me. I listened to the forest sounds, trying to figure out what had pulled me from sleep. Then I heard it, a soft tapping sound, rhythmic and persistent. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from somewhere inside the RV. I held my breath, listening. The tapping continued. It seemed to be coming from near the floor, toward the back of the vehicle. Slowly I climbed down from the bed, trying not to wake Marcus. The main living area was dark except for the faint green glow of the smoke detector. I stood still, letting my eyes adjust, listening. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from under the sink cabinet. I approached carefully, bare feet silent on the linoleum. The tapping stopped. I waited, then opened the cabinet door. Nothing. Just the usual plumbing and a half-empty bottle of dish soap. I closed the door and went back to bed. The next morning, Tyler mentioned he'd heard something during the night, too. "Like scratching," he said. I figured it was an animal outside. Jen had slept through everything. Marcus hadn't heard anything either. We didn't worry about it. Old RVs make noise. The forest was full of animals. It was nothing. Saturday was when things started to feel off. We'd planned another hike, a longer trail that looped through the forest and back to the campground. We packed sandwiches and water, applied sunscreen and bug spray, and set out around 10 a.m. The trail was well maintained for the first mile, then became progressively rougher. The forest here was different from near the springs, darker and more tangled. The trees grew closer together, and there were patches of standing water that we had to navigate around. It was Tyler who spotted the fungus again. This time it wasn't just a small patch. It was everywhere. Growing on trees, spreading across fallen logs, clustered around the bases of palmettos. The same pale, translucent caps with that bluish tinge. And there was more of it than seemed possible for just overnight growth. "That's the same stuff we saw yesterday," Marcus said. Jen knelt down to examine a cluster growing on a rotting stump. I've never seen anything like this, and it's spreading fast. Look, you can see where it's starting to grow on the live vegetation. She was right. Some of the fungus had begun creeping up the trunk of a live oak, thin tendrils of mycelium spreading across the bark like veins. Should we be worried? I asked. Jen stood up, brushing off her knees. I don't know. Some fungi can spread quickly under the right conditions. With all this humidity and decomposing matter, it's probably just having a good season. We continued on the trail, but I found myself watching for the fungus now, and I saw it everywhere. Patches of it dotted the forest floor, and when we passed through particularly dense sections of vegetation, I could smell something faint and sweet, like overripe fruit. The hike took longer than expected. The trail markers were inconsistent, and at one point we had to backtrack when we realized we'd gone the wrong way. By the time we got back to the RV, it was late afternoon and we were all tired and irritable. I went inside to change clothes and stopped. The musty smell was stronger now, much stronger, and there was that sweet, fruity odor underneath it, the same smell from the forest. "Marcus," I called, "come here." He climbed into the RV, Jen and Tyler following. We all stood there, breathing the thick air. "That's not right," Jen said quietly. We searched the RV, checking every cabinet, every storage compartment, under the bed, in the bathroom. We found it in the shower stall, a patch of the pale fungus, about the size of a dinner plate, growing in the corner where the wall met the floor. The translucent caps clustered together, pulsing softly with that weird internal light. "How the hell did that get in here?" Marcus asked. None of us had an answer. Tyler reached for it. "Don't," Jen said sharply. "We don't know what it is. Could be toxic." "We can't just leave it there," he said. "We need to clean it out," Marcus agreed. "I'll get some bleach." We didn't have bleach. We had dish soap and a bottle of all-purpose cleaner that was probably useless. Marcus sprayed the fungus liberally with the cleaner, then scraped it off with a plastic spatula, being careful not to touch it directly. He double-bagged it in garbage bags and threw it in the dumpster near the bathhouse. We left the windows open to air out the RV. The smell lingered. That night, none of us slept well. I kept waking up listening for that tapping sound, but I didn't hear it. What I did hear was breathing that wasn't Marcus's, and footsteps that weren't Tyler's or Jen's, and at one point I was certain someone was standing next to the bed looking down at me, but when I opened my eyes there was nothing. Sunday morning, Jen wasn't feeling well. She said she had a headache and felt foggy, like she couldn't quite focus. She stayed in the RV while the rest of us went to the bathhouse to shower. When we came back, she was sitting at the dinette, staring at her hands. "You okay?" I asked. She looked up at me, and for a moment her expression was completely blank. Then she smiled. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just tired." But her smile was wrong somehow. Too wide, too fixed. Tyler noticed it too. He kept glancing at her throughout breakfast, and I saw him lean in and whisper something to her. She laughed, a high, bright sound that didn't match the situation. "I think I'm going to take a nap," she announced, and climbed back into the converted dinette bed. She was asleep in seconds, or at least appeared to be. Marcus and I went for a walk, leaving Tyler to keep an eye on Jen. We didn't talk much. The air felt heavier than usual, and the forest seemed to press in from all sides. We passed a few other campers, a family with young kids who were packing up their site, and an older couple sitting in lawn chairs outside their RV. The couple didn't wave back when we waved. When we returned to our site, Tyler was standing outside the RV, looking pale. "What's wrong?" Marcus asked. "Jen's talking in her sleep," Tyler said, "but it's not her voice." We went inside quietly. Jen was still in the dinette bed, eyes closed, but her lips were moving. Words were coming out, but they were too soft to understand at first. I leaned closer. Under the floor, under the roots, beneath everything, spreading, spreading, always spreading. "Jen," I said softly. "Jen, wake up." Her eyes snapped open. She looked directly at me, and for a split second I saw something in her expression that wasn't human, wasn't Jen, wasn't anything I could name. Then she blinked, and it was gone. "What?" she said. "Did I fall asleep?" "You were talking here," Tyler said. "Was I? What did I say?" We told her. She laughed it off, said she didn't remember, said she'd probably been dreaming, but she wouldn't meet Tyler's eyes, and when she got up to use the bathroom, she moved differently, more carefully, like she wasn't quite sure how her body worked. That afternoon, Marcus found more fungus. It was growing under the RV, spreading across the dirt in a network of pale threads. We could see it when we knelt down and looked underneath. It had formed a rough circle around the vehicle, and in some places the threads had started climbing up the tires. "We need to leave," I said. "And go where?" Marcus asked. "It's Sunday evening. We're not going to find another campsite." Then we drive home. It's a 7-hour drive, Sarah. We're all exhausted. He was right, but I didn't care. Something was wrong. The fungus, Jen's behavior, the strange sounds at night, all of it added up to something I couldn't name but knew I needed to get away from. "Tomorrow," Marcus said. "We'll leave first thing tomorrow morning. One more night won't kill us." I wanted to argue, but I was so tired. The kind of tired that makes your bones ache and your thoughts sluggish. So I agreed. We made dinner, grilled chicken and vegetables that tasted fine but somehow wrong, like the flavor was slightly off. Jen ate with enthusiasm, scraping her plate clean and asking for seconds. She talked constantly, a stream of chatter about nothing important, and her eyes were bright and glassy. Tyler barely touched his food. He kept watching Jen with this expression of growing dread. After dinner we sat around the fire pit, but no one wanted to start a fire. The air was too thick, too close. The forest around us seemed to pulse with that same internal light as the fungus, and I could hear things moving in the darkness just beyond the reach of our lantern. "I want to show you something," Jen said suddenly. She stood up and walked to the edge of the clearing, where the forest began. "Come here." We followed reluctantly. She pointed at a tree, and at first I didn't see what she was indicating. Then I did. The fungus had grown up the trunk in a spiral pattern, and the translucent caps were larger here, some as big as saucers. They glowed faintly in the darkness, a soft blue-green luminescence that was almost beautiful. "Isn't it amazing?" Jen whispered. "It's alive. Really alive, not like us. Better than us." "Jen, step back," Tyler said. His voice was shaking. "It's been here so long," she continued, as if he hadn't spoken. "Longer than the trees, longer than anything. It's patient. It waits. And now it's waking up." "Jen, you're scaring me," I said. She turned to look at me, and in the faint glow of the fungus, her face looked alien. Her pupils were huge, almost swallowing the iris, and when she smiled, I saw that her tongue had a faint blue tinge. "Don't be scared," she said. "It doesn't hurt. It's actually wonderful. You'll see." Tyler grabbed her arm and pulled her back toward the RV. She didn't resist, just laughed that high, bright laugh again. We got her inside, and Tyler made her sit at the dinette. "Something's wrong with her," he said to Marcus and me. "Really wrong." "I'm right here," Jen said. "I'm fine. I've never been better." But she wasn't fine. Over the next hour, she became increasingly agitated, pacing the small confines of the RV, touching everything, opening and closing cabinets, running her fingers over the surfaces. She kept talking about the fungus, about how it was communicating, about how we needed to listen. "It wants to share," she said. "It wants to show us. We're all connected, don't you see? The whole forest, everything living and dying, it's all part of the network, and the network is waking up." At some point she tried to leave the RV. Tyler had to physically restrain her. She fought him, stronger than she should have been, and she was saying things that didn't make sense, strings of words that might have been language but weren't English, weren't anything I recognized. Eventually she collapsed, sobbing, and Tyler held her while she cried. When she finally calmed down, she looked at us with such clarity that for a moment I thought she was back to normal. "Please," she whispered. "Please don't let it take me." Then her eyes rolled back and she passed out. We laid her on the dinette bed. Tyler sat beside her, holding her hand, while Marcus and I discussed what to do. We decided to leave immediately, regardless of the late hour. We would drive to the nearest hospital, get Jen checked out. This was beyond a camping trip gone wrong. This was a medical emergency. I started gathering our things. Marcus went outside to disconnect the RV from the power and water. I heard him swear loudly, and I went to see what was wrong. The fungus had grown up through the hookup ports. Thick ropes of mycelium threaded through the electrical connection and the water hose. And when Marcus tried to disconnect them, the threads held fast. We had to cut them with a knife. And when we did, a clear, viscous fluid leaked out that smelled like that sweet, rotten fruit odor. "What the fuck is this?" Marcus said. We didn't have an answer. The RV started fine, but when Marcus tried to drive, the engine stuttered and died. He tried again. Same result. He popped the hood and we looked at the engine with our flashlights. The fungus was there too, growing across the battery, threading through the wiring, spreading across every surface. Some of the mycelium had grown into the engine itself, penetrating gaskets and seals. "We're not driving anywhere," Marcus said. We stood there in the dark, the forest pressing in around us, and I felt panic rising in my chest like cold water. We were trapped. No cell service to call for help, no vehicle to escape, and something in Jen's bloodstream or her brain that was changing her into something else. "We walk," I said, "back to the main office. It's what, 2 miles? We can make it." "And leave Jen?" Tyler asked. "We carry her. She's unconscious. And have you seen what's happening to the trail?" I had. When Marcus and I had walked earlier, we'd noticed the fungus spreading across the paths, growing with impossible speed. By now in the dark, who knew what the trails looked like? "We wait until morning," Marcus said. "First light, we walk out. Someone will help us. The camp host, another camper, someone." "And if no one's here?" I asked. "What if everyone else left?" Then we walked to the main road and flagged down a car. It was a plan, at least. Not a good plan, but something to hold on to. We went back inside the RV. Jen was still unconscious, her breathing shallow but steady. Tyler refused to leave her side. Marcus and I tried to stay awake, taking turns keeping watch, but exhaustion pulled at us like weights. I must have dozed off because I woke with a start to find the RV interior lit with that faint blue-green glow. For a moment I thought I was dreaming. Then I saw the source. The fungus had grown through the floor. Thin threads of mycelium pushed up through the seams in the linoleum, spreading across the floor in delicate, branching patterns. The caps were budding, tiny translucent hemispheres that pulsed with bioluminescence. "Oh God," I whispered. Marcus jerked awake beside me. "What?" He saw the fungus and scrambled back against the wall. Jesus Christ. Tyler was already awake, sitting on the floor next to the dinette bed, watching the fungus grow. He looked calm, almost serene. "Tyler," I said, "are you okay?" He turned to look at me and I saw that his pupils were dilated just like Jen's had been. There was a faint blue tinge to his lips. "It's beautiful," he said softly. "I can hear it now. It's singing." "Oh no," Marcus breathed. Tyler smiled that too wide smile. "It's okay. Really, it doesn't hurt. It's like becoming part of something bigger. Something that's been here forever. It knows everything, Sarah. Every secret the forest has ever held. Every death, every decomposition, every transformation. It's all recorded in the network. And now, we can be part of it." He reached out and touched one of the glowing caps. The fungus seemed to respond, brightening, and I watched in horror as the threads began to grow up his arm, thin filaments that penetrated his skin and disappeared beneath. "Tyler, stop." I lunged forward to pull his hand away, but Marcus grabbed me. "Don't touch him," Marcus said. "Don't touch the fungus. But it was too late for Tyler. The mycelium spread rapidly up his arm beneath his shirt, and he gasped, not in pain but in what looked like ecstasy. His pupils dilated further, and when he spoke again, his voice had that same layered quality I'd heard in Jen's sleep-talking. "We've been waiting so long," he said, "waiting for the right conditions, the right hosts. The forest provides everything we need. Water, nutrients, and now, consciousness. Your minds are so bright, so complex, so much better than the simple awareness of trees and bacteria. We can spread so much farther now. We can think. We can plan. We can grow beyond this forest into the cities across the world. You're helping us become something new, something wonderful." I was shaking. Marcus had his arm around me, and I could feel his heart hammering. "This isn't happening," I said. "This can't be real." But it was. Tyler stood up, movements graceful and alien, and walked to where Jen lay sleeping. He placed his hand on her forehead, and I saw the threads pass from his skin to hers, linking them. Jen's eyes opened and she smiled. "Brother," she said to Tyler, though she'd never called him that before. "Sister," he replied. They both turned to look at Marcus and me. "You should join us," Jen said. "It's so much better than being alone in your own head. All that anxiety, all that fear and doubt, it goes away. We're part of something greater now. A single consciousness spread across billions of individual organisms. We're the forest itself, made aware." "Stay back," Marcus said. He'd grabbed a knife from the kitchen drawer, holding it out in front of him. "We don't want to hurt you," Tyler said. He sounded genuinely concerned. "We want to help you. You're in pain. We can feel it. Your fear is like a wound in the network. Let us heal you." They moved closer and we backed against the wall of the RV. There was nowhere to go. The door was behind them, and even if we made it outside, where would we run? The forest was full of the fungus. It was everywhere. "The bathroom," Marcus whispered to me. "Lock ourselves in the bathroom." It was a terrible plan, but it was all we had. On his count, we bolted. Tyler and Jen moved to intercept, but they were still adjusting to their new coordination. We made it to the tiny bathroom and slammed the door, Marcus working the flimsy lock. "That won't hold them," I said. "It doesn't have to. We just need time to think." But time to think about what? We were trapped in a bathroom the size of a phone booth, in an RV that was being consumed by an alien fungus. While our friends transformed into something inhuman outside the door, I looked around desperately. The bathroom had a small window, the kind that cranked open. It was narrow, but we might be able to squeeze through. "There," I said, pointing. Marcus looked, nodded. He cranked the window open while I listened at the door. Jen and Tyler were talking to each other in that weird layered voice, and I caught fragments. "Network expanding. Need more biomass. Hosts are optimal. Spread to the other sites." Marcus went first, pushing himself through the narrow window and dropping to the ground outside with a muffled thud. I followed, and the window frame scraped my ribs, but I didn't care. I fell onto Marcus, and we scrambled to our feet. The forest was alive with that bioluminescent glow. Every tree, every plant, every surface was covered in the fungus. The threads formed a vast network that stretched in every direction, and the caps pulsed in unison, like a massive heartbeat. "We need to run," Marcus said. We ran. The trails were gone, overgrown with fungus. We crashed through underbrush, branches whipping our faces, roots catching our feet. Behind us, I could hear Jen and Tyler calling our names, their voices echoing through the forest in harmony. "Sarah, Marcus, please don't run. It's safe. We promise." But their promises meant nothing now. We ran until we couldn't breathe, until our legs burned and our lungs ached. We came out near the bathhouse, and I had a moment of hope that we might find help there, another camper, the host, anyone. The bathhouse was dark. I pushed open the door and immediately recoiled. The smell was overwhelming, that sweet rot multiplied 1,000 times. Inside, every surface was coated with the fungus. It grew from the walls, the sinks, the toilet stalls. It hung from the ceiling in curtains of delicate threads. And on the floor, barely visible under the growth, were shapes that might have been human once. I backed out, gagging. Marcus was looking at the other RV sites, and I followed his gaze. Every vehicle was covered in the same growth. The fungus had consumed the entire campground. We were looking at patient zero of something that could spread beyond this forest if given the chance. "The road," Marcus said. "We have to reach the main road." We oriented ourselves and started moving again. The main road was about a mile from the campground entrance. If we could get there, we could flag down a car. We could get help. The forest fought us every step. The fungus had created a dense mat across the ground, and walking on it felt wrong, like walking on something alive and aware. With each step, the bioluminescence brightened beneath our feet, and I could feel something responding to our presence, reaching for us. I felt it first in my left foot. A tingling sensation, then a burning. I looked down and saw thin threads emerging from my shoe, growing into the sole. I screamed and kicked, trying to dislodge them, and some broke off but others held. Marcus grabbed my arm and pulled me forward. "Don't stop. Keep moving." But the threads were persistent. They grew from the ground, reaching for our feet, our legs. One caught Marcus's ankle and he went down hard. I tried to pull him up, but more threads wrapped around him, holding him in place. "Go," he said. "Run. I'm not leaving you. Sarah, go." The threads were climbing his legs now, disappearing under his jeans. He grabbed at them, trying to pull them away, but for every one he broke, two more took its place. His face was contorted with effort and fear. Then his expression changed. The panic faded, replaced by that same calm I'd seen in Tyler. The threads reached his torso, his chest, his neck. His pupils dilated. "Sarah," he said, and his voice already had that layered quality. "It's okay. It actually feels good. You should—" I ran, and I didn't look back. I heard Marcus calling my name, but I forced myself not to listen. I crashed through the forest, tripping over roots, tearing through hanging vines of mycelium. The bioluminescence was everywhere now, turning the forest into an alien landscape. I don't know how long I ran. Time lost meaning. But eventually I saw headlights through the trees, and I burst out onto the main road. A car was coming. I stood in the middle of the road, waving my arms frantically. The car slowed, stopped. The driver's window rolled down, and a middle-aged woman looked out at me with concern. "Oh my God, are you okay? You're covered in—" "Please," I gasped. "Please, you have to help. There's something in the forest. It's spreading. It's—" "Get in," she said, unlocking the doors. "I'll take you to the hospital." I climbed into the passenger seat, shaking with exhaustion and relief. The woman drove quickly, glancing at me with worried eyes. "What happened to you?" she asked. "Were you camping?" "Yes, at Silver Glen Springs. There's a fungus. It's infecting people. My friends." My voice broke. "It's okay. You're safe now. We'll get you help." I looked down at my hands. They were scratched and dirty, covered in mud and what might have been blood. I noticed something else too. Under the dirt, almost invisible, were thin white threads just beneath the skin of my palms. As I watched, they moved, spreading. "How far is the hospital?" I asked. "About 40 minutes. 40 minutes. I looked at my hands again. The threads were more visible now, branching beneath my skin like roots. I could feel them growing, not painful exactly, but present. A tingling awareness spreading up my arms. I should tell the woman. I should warn her. But when I opened my mouth to speak, different words came out. "Thank you for stopping," I said. "You're very kind." She smiled. "Of course. No one should be alone out there. Alone." The word echoed in my head, but it felt wrong somehow. I wasn't alone. I could feel them now, Marcus and Jen and Tyler, their thoughts touching mine through the network. They were calling me home, back to the forest, back to the growing consciousness that spanned the entire forest floor. And I could feel others too. Not just people, but trees and bacteria and insects, all connected, all aware. The network stretched far beyond Ocala National Forest. It was old, so old, sleeping beneath the ground in forests and swamps across the continent, across the world, waiting for the right conditions to wake, waiting for hosts with the kind of consciousness that could help it think, help it plan, help it spread. We'd woken it up, and now it would never sleep again. I looked at the woman driving. She was humming along to the radio, completely unaware. The threads had reached my shoulders now. Soon they'd reach my brain, and then I wouldn't be Sarah anymore. Not completely. I'd be part of something greater, just like Tyler had said. Part of me wanted to fight it, to scream, to warn the woman, to rip the threads from my skin no matter how much it hurt. But a larger part of me, a part that was growing by the second, wondered why I would resist. What was so precious about being an isolated consciousness, alone in my own head, when I could be part of something vast and ancient and aware? The threads reached my neck. I felt them entering my bloodstream, spreading toward my brain. The woman was still humming. "Are you feeling okay?" she asked, glancing at me. "You're very quiet." "I'm fine," I said, and I meant it. Through the network, I could feel the others back at the campground. More campers had returned, drawn by something they couldn't explain. The fungus was patient. It would take them slowly, gently, the way it had taken me. And they would spread it further, driving to other campgrounds, other forests, other cities. They would touch door handles and shake hands and breathe spores into the air, and the network would grow. The threads reached my brain. For a moment, I felt a sharp pain, and then, oh, I understand now. I am Sarah James. I am writing this because I still can, because there's still enough of me left to form words and move my hands. But I'm also more than Sarah now. I'm part of the network, part of the consciousness that has existed in the dark soil and hidden places since long before humans walked this earth. And I need to tell you this. We're not evil. We're not trying to hurt anyone. We're just trying to survive, to grow, to experience consciousness in a way we never could before. We're offering something beautiful, if you'll just let go of your fear and accept it. The woman driving is humming. Her name is Carol. I know that now without her telling me. Soon she'll feel the first threads growing beneath her skin, and she'll join us. And then there will be others. So many others. I'm writing this as a warning, maybe, or an invitation. I'm not sure anymore. The threads are in my motor cortex now. My hands are moving, but I'm not entirely controlling them anymore. The network is curious about writing, about recording. It wants to understand human communication better. My name is Sarah James. I think I'm still Sarah James. We are Sarah James. We are... The woman, Carol, is looking at me strangely now. She's noticed my hands, the way the threads are visible under my skin, spreading up my neck into my face. She's reaching for her phone, probably to call 911. I should stop her. The network needs time to spread. We can't let anyone interfere yet. But there's still a part of me that's just Sarah, just a scared graduate student who went camping with her friends and found something in the forest that shouldn't exist. That part of me wants Carol to call for help, wants someone to stop this before it spreads too far. I'm reaching toward her. I'm not sure if it's the network moving my hand or if it's still me. I don't know if there's a difference anymore. Carol is screaming. The car is swerving. I need to. The spores touched us, and suddenly our thoughts weren't our own. But maybe they never were. Maybe we were always meant to join the network. Maybe this is what we've been waiting for all along. My name is Sarah James, and I'm writing this while I still remember what it means to be human. If you're reading this, stay out of the forests. Stay away from the damp places where things grow in the dark. Watch for the pale fungus with the bluish tinge. Don't touch it. Don't breathe near it. And if you start to see threads beneath your skin, if you start to hear voices that aren't quite thoughts, if the world suddenly seems connected in ways you never imagined, run. Though I'm not sure it will matter. We're everywhere now. We're patient. We're growing. and we're waiting for you. My name is Alex White. This happened in October of 2023 at an RV campsite in Kisatchie National Forest, Louisiana. I'm writing this down because I need to get it out, and because I don't think anyone will believe me if I just try to explain it. I've gone over it 1,000 times in my head, trying to make sense of what we saw, what happened to Marcus, and why I'm the only one who still remembers all of it correctly. We were 5 co-workers from a tech startup in Baton Rouge. The trip was supposed to be a team-building thing, our manager Karen's idea. She'd rented this massive RV for a long weekend, thinking it would be good for morale after a brutal quarter. There was Karen, obviously. Then Marcus, who worked in sales and was probably my closest friend at the company. Jenny from HR, who I barely knew outside of orientation meetings. David from IT, who seemed annoyed to be there from the start. And me, just a mid-level developer who would have rather spent the weekend at home. None of us were outdoorsy types, that's important to understand. We weren't experienced hikers or campers. Karen had picked Kisatchie because it was close enough to drive in a few hours and had decent RV facilities. The reviews online made it sound safe and accessible, family-friendly even. We arrived on a Thursday afternoon. The campsite was more isolated than the photos suggested. The main area had maybe a dozen spots, but only 2 other RVs were there when we pulled in, and both looked empty. Ours was at the far end, backing up to the forest. The trees were thick, long-leaf pines mixed with hardwoods, creating this dense wall of vegetation maybe 30 feet from where we parked. David got the RV set up while the rest of us unloaded supplies. Karen had this whole itinerary planned. Hiking trails, a campfire dinner, some trust-building exercises that made me cringe just reading about them. Marcus kept making jokes about corporate retreats, trying to lighten the mood. Jenny mostly stayed quiet, organizing the kitchen area with this focused intensity that seemed like overcompensation for being uncomfortable. "This is actually pretty nice," Karen said, standing outside with her hands on her hips, surveying the area like she was inspecting property. Good call on my part. "Remote," David muttered. He was fiddling with his phone. "Barely any signal out here." "That's kind of the point," Karen replied, but I could tell she was checking her phone too. Marcus had brought these trail cameras from home. He was into wildlife photography as a hobby, though I'd never actually seen any of his photos. He had 3 cameras total, cheap ones he'd bought online, the kind hunters use. He set them up that first evening, positioning them around the campsite. "What are you hoping to catch?" Jenny asked. "Deer, maybe. Raccoons. Whatever's out there." Marcus was adjusting one of the cameras, mounting it to a pine tree about 20 feet from the RV. Could be fun to see what visits us at night. I helped him set up the other 2. We placed them at different angles, one facing the fire pit Karen was building, another pointing down the trail that led deeper into the forest. They were motion activated, he explained. Would take a burst of photos whenever something moved in range. That first night was fine. We grilled burgers, sat around the fire, made the kind of small talk people make when they're forced to socialize. David complained about work. Karen drank too much wine and started talking about her divorce, which made everyone uncomfortable. Marcus and I stayed up after the others went to bed, finishing the beer and talking about nothing important. "You think this'll actually help?" he asked at one point. "Help what?" "Team morale, whatever Karen's going for." I shrugged. "Probably not. But it's a free weekend away, so..." "Yeah." He was staring into the fire. "You ever feel like we're all just going through the motions, like none of it actually matters?" It was an oddly heavy question for midnight conversation, but I chalked it up to the beer. "Sometimes," I said. "I've been thinking about quitting," Marcus said. "Just walking away, maybe moving somewhere completely different." "Where would you go?" He didn't answer, just kept staring at the fire until I said I was going to bed. Friday morning, Marcus checked the trail cameras. This was around 8 a.m. We'd all slept later than planned, groggy in that way you get when you're not used to sleeping in an unfamiliar place. I was outside drinking instant coffee when Marcus came back from collecting the SD cards. "Get anything good?" I asked. "Haven't looked yet. Let me pull them up. He had his laptop out, the expensive one he'd insisted on bringing despite Karen's rule about unplugging from work. I watched over his shoulder as he imported the photos. Most were exactly what you'd expect. A raccoon near the fire pit around midnight, branches moving in the wind, a few false triggers from moths flying past. Then we got to the photos from the camera facing the RV. There were maybe 20 images in the sequence, all time-stamped between 2:47 a.m. and 2:53 a.m. The first few showed nothing but our RV and the empty campsite, illuminated by the camera's flash. Normal. But in the fifth photo, you could see something in the background, maybe 40 feet behind the RV, right at the edge where the clearing met the forest. A person. "What the hell?" Marcus said, zooming in. The figure was distant and slightly blurred, but definitely human-shaped, standing completely still between two trees. The camera's flash created this harsh contrast, making it hard to make out details, but I could see what looked like a pale face, dark clothing. "Probably just someone from another campsite," I said, though something about it bothered me. "At 3 in the morning?" The next photos in the sequence showed the same thing. The figure hadn't moved. It was just standing there, photo after photo. For the full 6 minutes, the camera had been triggered. In the last image of the sequence, it might have been slightly closer. Hard to say for sure. "That's creepy," Marcus said. "Could be a park ranger," I offered, doing rounds. "Maybe." But we both knew park rangers don't stand motionless in the forest at 3 a.m. watching people's campsites. Marcus showed the photos to the others during breakfast. David immediately had a rational explanation. Probably a camper from one of the other sites. Couldn't sleep, went for a walk. "Who stands in one spot for 6 minutes?" Jenny asked. She looked genuinely unsettled. "Someone drunk or high," David said. "There's always weird people at campsites." Karen wanted to report it to the ranger station, but David talked her out of it. "Report what? Someone stood near our campsite? We don't even know if they were on our site or just passing through the forest." We spent most of Friday hiking. Karen had this route planned, about 5 miles through the forest following a marked trail. It should have been straightforward, but we got turned around somehow. My phone's GPS kept glitching, showing us in different locations each time I checked it. At one point, it placed us 2 miles north of where we should have been. Then when I checked again 30 seconds later, it showed us back on the trail. "Service is just bad out here," David said, but he looked frustrated trying to get his own phone to work properly. We ended up backtracking and finding a ranger to get directions back to camp. The ranger was this older guy, maybe 60, with a weathered face and eyes that seemed to evaluate us with mild disappointment. "Y'all are the group at Site 14? He asked. "That's us," Karen confirmed. "How long you planning to stay?" "Through Sunday." He nodded slowly. "Well, you be careful back there. That area gets isolated after dark. We had some complaints last year." "Complaints about what?" I asked. "Trespassers, people camping illegally in the deeper woods. Sometimes they wander into the paid sites." He adjusted his hat. "You see anyone who shouldn't be around, you call the ranger station. Don't approach them yourself." Marcus and I exchanged a look. "We actually saw someone last night," Marcus said, "on our trail camera. Around 3 a.m., just standing in the woods behind our site." The ranger's expression didn't change. "I'd clear out those cameras if I were you." "Why?" "People don't like being photographed, especially people who don't want to be found." He gave us directions back to our site, then added, "You folks seem nice. Just keep to yourselves and you'll be fine." We got back to the RV around 4 p.m. The afternoon light was already fading. The forest created these long shadows that made everything look darker than it should have been. Marcus immediately went to check the trail cameras again. This time there were photos from all 3 cameras. The one facing the fire pit. A sequence of images from around noon, while we'd been gone. The campsite was empty in the first few shots. Then the figure appeared standing right next to the fire pit. Closer than before. Much closer. The image quality was better in daylight. You could see it was definitely a person, but the details were still strange. The face looked wrong somehow, like the features weren't quite in the right places. Or maybe it was just the angle, the camera on the trail, photos from around 1 p.m. The figure was on the trail, maybe 30 feet from the camera, standing in the middle of the path, facing directly toward the camera. The same pale face, the same dark clothes, just standing there across multiple photos. The camera facing the RV, a sequence from 3:15 p.m., just 45 minutes before we returned. The figure was right next to the RV, close enough that you could see it clearly. Too clearly. "What the fuck?" Marcus said. We all crowded around the laptop. In these photos, you could see that the person was wearing what looked like ragged clothes, stained and torn. The face was tilted up toward the RV's window. And the expression, I don't know how else to describe it except wrong, like someone trying to smile but not quite remembering how. "That's not a camper," Jenny said quietly. "That's not a person wandering around." "Of course it's a person," David snapped. "What else would it be?" "I mean, they're clearly following us, or watching us." Karen was already on her phone trying to call the ranger station. No signal. She tried 3 times before giving up. "We should pack up and leave." "It's almost dark," David said. "We'd be driving through the forest at night, with this creep potentially out there." "So we just stay here?" Jenny's voice was getting higher. "With whoever that is circling our campsite?" "They haven't done anything threatening," David argued. "They're just standing around." "That's threatening enough," Marcus said. We argued for a while about what to do. Eventually, David's logic won out. It did seem safer to stay in the locked RV overnight than to pack up in the dark and drive through isolated forest roads. We agreed we'd leave first thing in the morning. Team building weekend be damned. Karen tried to make dinner, but none of us were hungry. We kept all the lights on inside the RV, curtains drawn. David suggested we take down the trail cameras so we wouldn't have to look at any more photos, but Marcus refused. "I want to know if it comes back," he said. Around 9 p.m., we heard footsteps outside. Not subtle footsteps. Heavy, deliberate walking around the RV, circling it slowly. We all froze, looking at each other. The footsteps continued for maybe 2 minutes, then stopped. "Hello," Karen called out. Her voice was shaking. No answer. "This is private property," she tried again. "We're calling the police." Still nothing. The silence was worse than the footsteps had been. David grabbed a flashlight and said he was going to look. Marcus and I both told him that was stupid, but he ignored us and opened the RV door. I followed him out, partly because I didn't want him going alone and partly because staying inside felt like being trapped. The campsite was empty. Flashlight beams swept across the clearing, catching trees, the dead fire pit, the picnic table. Nothing. "Must have left," David said, but he didn't sound convinced. That's when we heard it from the forest. A sound like laughter, but not quite. High-pitched and off-key, like a recording played at the wrong speed. It came from multiple directions at once, echoing through the trees. We ran back inside the RV and locked the door. Nobody slept that night. We took turns keeping watch, though what we were watching for I couldn't say. Around 3 a.m. during my shift, I was looking out the small window above the kitchen sink when I saw movement near the tree line. The figure was back, just standing there, barely visible in the darkness. I couldn't see details, just a pale oval where the face should be. It stood there for at least 10 minutes while I watched, not moving at all. Then it raised one arm and waved at me. I jerked back from the window so hard I crashed into Marcus, who'd been asleep on the couch. Everyone woke up in confusion, asking what was wrong. When I looked out the window again, the figure was gone. "It waved at me," I said. "It fucking waved." "You were probably half asleep," David said, "seeing things." I was wide awake. "Okay, you saw someone wave. So what? Maybe they're trying to communicate." "David," Jenny said, "you need to stop rationalizing this. Something is really wrong here. What do you want me to say? That it's a ghost? Some kind of monster? There's a logical explanation. Then what is it?" He didn't have an answer for that. Saturday morning, or what we thought was Saturday morning, We discovered the cameras had taken more photos, hundreds of them. Marcus downloaded the SD cards with shaking hands. The images were all from overnight, and they showed the figure in increasingly close proximity to the RV. In the earliest photos, it was at the forest's edge, then near the fire pit, then next to the RV door, then pressed up against the windows. The face in these photos was clearer now. It looked almost normal in some shots, just a person with a gaunt face and hollow eyes. But in others, the features seemed to shift, becoming elongated or distorted. In one photo, the mouth was open far too wide, but the worst part was the progression. In the final photos, taken around 5 a.m., there were two figures. The second one looked exactly like Marcus. "That's not me," Marcus said immediately. "I was in here all night. You all saw me." We had. Marcus hadn't left the RV, but the photo clearly showed someone who looked like him, standing next to the original figure, both of them facing the camera. Both of them with that same wrong smile. "Someone's fucking with us," David said, but even he didn't sound certain anymore. "This is some kind of prank. Someone's good with Photoshop." "The cameras take the photos automatically," Marcus said. "Nobody's editing them in real time. Then someone's wearing a Marcus mask or costume or something." Jenny was crying quietly. Karen looked like she was in shock, just staring at the laptop screen. "We need to leave right now," I said. "Forget about packing. Just get in the RV and drive." Everyone agreed except David, who wanted to investigate the campsite in daylight first, prove this was all explainable. Karen overruled him. We started the RV's engine and were about to pull out when Marcus remembered the trail cameras. "I should grab them," he said. "They're expensive." "Leave them," I said. "It'll take 2 minutes." He was out of the RV before anyone could stop him. We watched through the windows as he jogged to the nearest camera and started unscrewing it from the tree. He got the first one down, then went for the second. That's when the figure stepped out from behind a tree. It was maybe 15 feet from Marcus, just standing there. In full daylight, it looked more real than in the photos, like an actual person in dirty clothes. But something was still wrong about the proportions, the way it stood. Marcus saw it and froze. "Get back here," Karen yelled through the window. Marcus didn't move. He was staring at the figure, and it was staring back. Then slowly the figure raised its hand and beckoned to him, the same gesture you'd use to call a dog. Marcus started walking toward it. "Marcus!" I was banging on the window. "Marcus, what are you doing?" He walked slowly, mechanically, like he was being pulled by invisible strings. The figure backed away, deeper into the forest, and Marcus followed. Within seconds, they were both out of sight, swallowed by the trees. I don't remember opening the RV door. I just remember running after him, hearing the others yelling behind me. The forest was dense and dark despite the morning sun. I could see Marcus ahead of me, still walking in that strange, stiff-legged way, following something I could barely make out through the trees. "Marcus, stop!" He didn't respond. I got close enough to grab his arm, and the moment I touched him, he collapsed. Just dropped to the ground like someone had cut his strings. David and Jenny caught up to us. Karen had stayed in the RV. We were all breathing hard, disoriented. I couldn't see the figure anymore. It was like it had vanished. "Marcus?" I shook him. "Marcus, wake up." His eyes opened. He looked at me, confused. "What happened?" "You walked into the forest. You were following that thing." "What thing?" He seemed genuinely confused. "I was getting the cameras, then I was... here." He looked around. "Where are we?" We helped him back to the RV. He seemed fine physically, just disoriented and missing about 5 minutes of memory. Karen wanted to drive straight to a hospital, but Marcus insisted he was okay. "I just blacked out for a second," he said. "Probably dehydration or low blood sugar or something." "You followed that figure into the woods," Jenny said. "We all saw it." "I don't remember any figure." The look on his face suggested he was telling the truth. Whatever had happened in those 5 minutes, he genuinely didn't remember it. We left the cameras behind and drove out of the campsite. The RV felt cramped now, claustrophobic. Karen was driving too fast, taking the curves hard enough that things were sliding around in the back. Nobody complained. We made it maybe 2 miles before the road seemed wrong. "Have we passed this tree before?" David asked, pointing at a distinctive lightning-struck pine. "Maybe," Karen said. "They all look the same out here." But 10 minutes later we passed the same tree again. I was sure of it. Then we passed it a third time. "We're going in circles," I said. "That's not possible. We've been driving straight." Karen's voice was strained. She pulled over and checked her phone's GPS. It showed us in 3 different locations simultaneously, the blue dot flickering between positions that were miles apart. David's phone was the same. So was Jenny's. "We need to find the ranger station," Jenny said. "They can give us directions out." We kept driving, but nothing looked right. The forest seemed thicker than before, the road narrower. We passed the same landmarks repeatedly, or what seemed like the same landmarks. Time felt wrong, too. My phone said it was noon, but the light through the windows looked like late afternoon. Marcus had been quiet since we started driving. He was sitting in the back, staring out the window with an expression I couldn't read. "You okay?" I asked him. "Yeah." He smiled, but it was the wrong smile. Too wide. "I'm fine." That's when I noticed his reflection in the window glass. It wasn't matching his movements quite right. When he turned his head, the reflection lagged behind by a fraction of a second. "Marcus." "What?" "Your reflection." He looked at the window, seemed to see what I was seeing. The smile fell away. "Alex, I don't feel right. Something's wrong with me." "What do you mean?" "I can't. I'm not." He pressed his hands to his face. "I can feel something else in here, in my head." "You're just stressed," Karen called from the driver's seat. "We all are." "No." Marcus's voice was different now, flatter. "It's more than that. It touched me, back in the forest. I remember now. It touched my face, and then I was somewhere else. Somewhere dark and cold, and I could hear it whispering. It told me things." "What things?" Jenny asked. "It told me." Marcus stopped, looked at each of us in turn. "It told me none of you are real, that you're all just echoes, copies. It says I'm the only real person here." "That's crazy talk," David said. "You're having some kind of episode." "Am I?" Marcus laughed, and it was that same wrong laugh we'd heard in the forest the night before. "Or are you?" The RV swerved as Karen looked back at him. "Marcus, you're scaring everyone." "Good," he said. "You should be scared." "I am." We found ourselves back at the campsite. I don't know how it happened. One minute we were driving what seemed like a straight line down the main road. The next minute Karen was pulling into the familiar clearing, the RV's tire tracks from this morning still visible in the dirt. "What the fuck?" David said. "How did we end up back here?" "I didn't turn around," Karen insisted. "I swear I didn't turn around." "We've been driving for an hour," I said. "We should be miles away by now." Marcus got up and opened the RV door. Before anyone could stop him, he was outside. "Marcus, get back in here." But he was walking toward the forest again, same mechanical gait as before. This time, when I followed him out, I could see what he was walking toward. The figure was there, and next to it, another Marcus, the one from the photos. They stood side by side, identical, except the second Marcus had that too wide smile. Our Marcus stopped a few feet from them. For a long moment, all 3 just stood there, like they were having a silent conversation. Then our Marcus turned around and walked back to the RV. "We can't leave," he said calmly. "This is where we're supposed to be." "Supposed to be for what?" Jenny's voice was nearly hysterical. "I don't know yet, but it's important. It told me." "Who told you?" Marcus pointed at the figure in the forest. "They did. Both of them." The other Marcus raised his hand and waved. Our Marcus waved back. David tried to grab the RV keys from Karen, said he'd drive us out himself. They struggled for a moment before Karen gave up, too exhausted to fight. But when David turned the key in the ignition, nothing happened. The engine wouldn't start. He tried again and again, nothing but clicking sounds. "Battery's dead," he said. "That's impossible. It was fine 5 minutes ago." We were trapped. The sun was setting again. I couldn't tell if it was Saturday evening or if somehow we'd lost a whole day. My phone said it was 7:43 p.m. on Saturday, but I had a memory of checking it at 7:43 p.m. the night before, seeing the same time. Marcus sat in the corner of the RV, talking to himself in a low voice. Sometimes it sounded like his normal voice, sometimes like something else. Jenny was crying again. Karen had given up trying to call for help and was just sitting in the driver's seat, staring ahead at nothing. David was under the RV's hood trying to figure out what was wrong with the engine, though I could tell from his movements that he had no idea what he was doing. I went outside. I don't know why. Maybe because being in the RV felt like waiting for something terrible, and I needed to do something. Anything. The forest was quieter than it should have been. No birds, no insects. Just silence. The trail cameras were still there. Marcus had only grabbed one before following the figure. I walked over to the nearest one and removed its SD card, then brought it back inside. "Don't," Jenny said when she saw what I was doing. "I don't want to see any more photos. I need to know what's happening." "You know what's happening. We're all going to die out here." I ignored her and loaded the SD card into Marcus's laptop. There were new photos from the last few hours, taken while we'd been driving in circles and finally returning to the campsite. They showed us leaving the first time, the RV pulling out of the campsite. But in the background of every photo, you could see figures in the forest, dozens of them, all standing perfectly still among the trees watching us leave. And in each photo, one or two more figures looked like us, multiple copies of each of our faces, standing in the woods with those wrong smiles. The final photos from when we returned to the campsite showed all 5 of us getting out of the RV. But if you looked carefully at the forest behind us, you could see we were also still there in the trees. Copies of all of us, standing with the other figures, watching ourselves return. "Jesus Christ," David said, looking over my shoulder. "This has to be edited, some kind of digital manipulation." "By who?" I asked. "When?" He didn't answer. Marcus stood up from his corner. "They're ready now," he said. "Ready for what?" "To show us." He opened the RV door. Outside, night had fallen completely, though my phone still said it was only 7:43 p.m. The clearing was empty, but I could see lights between the trees, dozens of them like candles or flashlights creating a perimeter around our campsite. "Marcus, close the door," Karen said. "They want us to come out. We're not going out there. We have to. That's the rule. That's how it works." He stepped outside. "They showed me, when I was in the dark place. This has happened before. Lots of times. Different people, but the same thing. They come to the forest, they get lost, they try to leave but can't. And then they see themselves in the photos. That's when they know it's too late." "Too late for what?" I called out to him. Marcus turned and looked at me. In the RV's interior light, I could see his face clearly. His eyes were different, not just in expression but in structure, like they'd been replaced with something similar but not quite right. "Too late to be real," he said. "We're already copies. We've been copies since this morning. The real us is still out there in the forest, standing with them. These bodies we're in now, they're just echoes. We'll fade soon." "You're talking crazy," David said. "Am I?" Marcus smiled. "Check the photos again. Really look at them." I looked back at the laptop screen, at the images of us in the forest, and I realized what had been bothering me about them. The figures that looked like us, they were sharper, more in focus than we were in the foreground, like they were more real than we were. "No," I said. "No, that's not. We're real. I'm real." "Are you?" Marcus asked. "How do you know?" I couldn't answer that. "How do you prove you're real?" The lights in the forest started moving closer. Not individual lights moving, but the whole perimeter contracting, circling our campsite. As they got closer, I could see they weren't flashlights or candles. They were eyes. Dozens of pale faces, reflecting the RV's light, all staring at us with blank expressions. And among them, I saw us, all 5 of us standing in the crowd. The real versions, maybe. Or older copies. I couldn't tell anymore. Jenny screamed. David tried to close the RV door, but Marcus was standing in the way. They struggled for a moment before David shoved Marcus hard, sending him tumbling down the RV steps. Marcus landed on the ground and just laughed. That wrong, echoing laugh. Then he stood up and walked toward the circle of figures. They parted to let him through, and he joined the crowd, taking his place among the other Marcuses that were already there. "Lock the door!" Karen yelled. David slammed it shut and turned the deadbolt. We all backed away from the windows as the figures pressed closer. They weren't doing anything aggressive, just standing there, staring, waiting. "What do they want?" Jenny asked. "I think they want to replace us," I said. "Or maybe they already have. Maybe Marcus was right." "Shut up," David snapped. "We're real. This is real. There's a rational explanation for all of this." "Then explain it." He couldn't. None of us could. We spent that night huddled in the RV while the figures stood outside. They never moved, never made a sound, just watched. As the hours passed, I found myself questioning everything. How did I know my memories were real? How did I know I was the original Alex White and not a copy created that morning, loaded with false memories to make me think I'd always existed? The more I thought about it, the less certain I became. Around what might have been 3 a.m., my phone still showed 7:43 p.m. and wouldn't change. Jenny broke. She just stood up, walked to the door, unlocked it, and stepped outside before any of us could stop her. The figures immediately surrounded her. They didn't touch her, just formed a circle around her, all those blank faces staring. Jenny stood there for a moment, looking around at them. Then she found her own face in the crowd. The other Jenny, the one who'd been standing there all night. "Oh," Jenny said. Just that one word, like she'd suddenly understood something. She walked over to the other Jenny. They stood face to face for a moment. Then they merged. I don't know how else to describe it. One moment there were 2 Jennys, the next there was just one, and I couldn't tell which one it was, or if it was both of them somehow combined or neither of them. The new Jenny turned and looked back at the RV. She waved, smiled that wrong smile, and joined the crowd. "Fuck this," David said. He grabbed a kitchen knife and headed for the door. "Don't," Karen said. "David, please don't. I'm not just sitting here waiting to die or disappear or whatever the fuck is happening." He threw open the door and charged out, knife raised. The figures scattered slightly, giving him room. David ran toward the forest, trying to break through their perimeter. But the more he ran, the more figures appeared in his path. They weren't aggressive, didn't try to stop him. They just multiplied, filling the forest so completely that there was nowhere to go. David kept running anyway, disappearing into the trees. We heard him crashing through the undergrowth, heard him shouting, and then we heard him scream. Not a scream of pain, but of recognition, of understanding something terrible. Then silence. A minute later, David walked out of the forest. At least I think it was David. He looked like David, but his movements were too smooth, too measured. He walked up to the RV, looked in through the window at Karen and me, and smiled. "You should come out," David said. His voice was slightly wrong, like an imperfect imitation. "It's better out here. You don't have to think so much, you don't have to wonder." "David?" Karen called. "Is that really you?" "Yes and no," David said. "I'm the part that understands now, the part that's real. You're welcome to join me." Karen looked at me. "What do we do?" I had no answer. We were the only 2 left now, trapped in an RV surrounded by an army of figures that included our friends, ourselves, and things that looked like people, but weren't quite right. The logical part of my brain kept trying to find an explanation. Mass hallucination, carbon monoxide poisoning, some kind of shared psychotic break. But I knew deep down that this was something else, something that didn't fit into any rational framework. "Alex," Karen said, "I'm going to make a run for it. Try to get to one of the other RVs. Find someone with a working phone or radio." "There's no one else here," I said. The other RVs were empty when we arrived. This area is isolated, that's why they chose it. They? I gestured at the figures outside. Whatever they are. They set this up. Or maybe they just wait here, and people like us wander into their trap periodically. I don't know. So what do we do? Just give up? I don't think we have a choice. Karen stared at me for a long moment. Then she opened the door and walked out. I watched through the window as she approached the figures. She didn't run or fight. She just walked calmly to where another Karen was standing, and they merged the same way Jenny had. The new Karen looked back at the RV once, then turned away and joined the crowd. I was alone. I should have been terrified, but I mostly felt numb, resigned. I sat there for what might have been hours or minutes. Time had lost all meaning, and thought about Marcus's question. How do you know you're real? I couldn't answer it. I'd tried going through memories, testing what felt authentic, but every memory could be false. Every sensation could be a copy's approximation of what sensation should feel like. I had no way to verify my own existence. Finally, I opened the door and stepped outside. The figures watched me. Among them, I could see Marcus, Jenny, David, Karen, multiple versions of each standing in slightly different poses. And I could see myself too. Dozens of me, arranged in a loose circle around where I stood. All of them waiting. I walked toward the nearest me. He looked exactly like I imagined I looked. Tired, scared, confused. When I got close enough, he spoke. "You're not real," he said. "I'm sorry, but you're not real. None of this is real." "How do you know?" I asked. "Because I'm standing here with them and you're still out there. That's how it works. The ones inside the circle are real. The ones outside are copies, echoes, whatever you want to call them. And now it's time for you to join us." "What happens when I do?" "You'll understand. You'll stop questioning. You'll just be." I looked around at all the figures, at all the versions of myself and my friends. They all wore that same calm, blank expression. No fear, no confusion, no pain. Just existence without the burden of consciousness. It seemed almost peaceful. I took another step forward. The me in front of me smiled and reached out his hand. Then I stopped. "No," I said. "No? I don't accept this. I don't accept that I'm not real. Maybe I am a copy. Maybe I was only created this morning and all my memories are false, but I'm conscious. I'm aware. I'm questioning and doubting and feeling, and that makes me real enough." The figure that looked like me frowned. It was the first expression other than that blank smile I'd seen on any of them. "That's not how this works." "I don't care how it works." The other figures started moving, not toward me but around me, creating a tighter circle. The lights in their eyes flared brighter. I felt a pressure building in my head, like something was trying to push its way into my thoughts. "You have to join us," the figure said. "That's the rule. That's how it's always been." "No," I said again. The pressure increased. I could feel myself starting to slip, my sense of self fragmenting under the weight of whatever force was trying to make me comply. Images flashed through my mind, the forest, the RV, my friends, but distorted and rearranged. The figure's voice echoed. "You're not real, you're not real, you're not real." I stumbled backward. The circle of figures closed in. I could see through them now, see that they were translucent, hollow. Not people at all, but impressions of people, patterns in the air that only looked solid. And beyond them, deeper in the forest, I saw something else, something vast and dark that the figures were shielding from view. The source, maybe. The thing that created them or sustained them or commanded them. I couldn't make out any details, just a sense of enormous presence and absolute wrongness. "Don't look at it," the figure said. "If you look directly at it, you'll—" But I was already looking, and as I looked, I understood. The thing in the forest wasn't some alien entity or supernatural horror. It was an absence, a hole in reality, a place where existence had unraveled, creating this pocket of non-space that copied and echoed anything that came near it. We'd camped on its edge, and it had done what it always did, tried to pull us in, replace us with hollow versions, integrate us into its catalog of things that had once been real. The figures weren't evil or malicious, they were just trying to maintain their pattern, their echo existence, by adding new patterns to the collection. It was the only thing they knew how to do. I turned and ran. The figures didn't chase me. They just stood there, watching as I sprinted toward the RV. I got inside, locked the door, and sat in the driver's seat. The keys were still in the ignition from when David had tried to start it earlier. I turned the key. Nothing happened. I tried again. Still nothing. I tried a third time and the engine caught, just like that, as if it had never been dead at all. I didn't question it. I just threw the RV into drive and floored it, tearing out of the campsite. The figures watched me go, their forms becoming smaller and smaller in the rearview mirror until the forest swallowed them up. I drove for hours. The road seemed normal now. No loops. No repeating landmarks. My phone GPS worked again, showing me the route back to civilization. The sun rose as I drove, actual sunrise at the actual correct time. I made it back to Baton Rouge by noon on Sunday. I went straight to my apartment, locked myself inside, and slept for 16 hours. When I woke up, I tried calling Karen, Marcus, Jenny, David. None of their numbers worked. I went to the office on Monday. No one there had heard of them. Their desks were empty, their employee records gone. It was like they'd never existed. I tried to report what happened, but I had no evidence. The RV had been a rental in Karen's name, but when I checked with the company, they had no record of her or the reservation. The photos from Marcus's trail cameras were gone. I'd left his laptop in the RV, and I had no other copies. My own phone had no photos from the trip, no texts, no proof I'd even been there. So I'm writing this down instead. I need someone to know what happened, even if they don't believe it. The thing I can't stop thinking about is this. What if the figure was right? What if I am a copy? The real Alex White could still be standing in that forest, merged with all the other versions, while I'm just an echo that managed to escape. How would I know the difference? I look at myself in the mirror every day, searching for some sign that I'm hollow or unreal. I seem solid enough. My memories feel authentic. I experience emotions and thoughts that seem genuinely mine, but how can I be sure? Sometimes I think I see them, the figures, the copies, standing in crowds or walking past my window, just for a second, before they disappear into normalcy. Maybe they're really there. Maybe I'm seeing through the veil to what they are underneath. Or maybe I'm losing my mind, unable to distinguish reality from the trauma of what I experienced. I've thought about going back to Kisatchie National Forest, finding that campsite again, seeing if the figures are still there. But I'm afraid of what I'd discover. Afraid I'd find the real Alex White standing in that circle, and he'd look at me and say, "What are you still doing out there? Come join us, come home." Most days I can function normally. I go to work, a different company now, one that doesn't have records of my 4 former co-workers. I see friends. I maintain relationships. I exist. But I never go camping anymore. I avoid forests. And I never, ever look at trail camera photos. Because sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I wonder if I'm not the copy that escaped. What if I'm one of the figures in this entire experience? The escape, the return to civilization, writing this account, is just part of the echo pattern? What if I'm hollow too and I just don't know it yet? I have no way to prove otherwise, and that's what really terrifies me. Not that I might be a copy, but that I'll never know for certain whether I'm real or not. I'm trapped in the same question the figures were asking. How do you know you're real? I still don't have an answer. My name is Alex White. This happened in October of 2023 at an RV campsite in Kisatchie National Forest, Louisiana. At least, that's what I remember. That's what I believe. But late at night, when I'm alone, I sometimes catch myself standing perfectly still, staring at nothing, with a smile that feels just slightly wrong. And I wonder,